There is a voice that accompanies us daily, a voice that often speaks louder than all others, a voice that judges every movement, every decision, every word spoken or unspoken, a relentless voice that demands constant perfection. This voice is the inner critic that lives within us, building an invisible prison made of impossible expectations and unattainable standards. How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying that small mistake during a work presentation? How many joys were stolen because you couldn't appreciate an achievement, focusing only on what could have been better? How many times have you felt paralyzed, unable to start something new for fear of not being exceptional on the first attempt? Perfectionism is like a severe master who is never satisfied. In contemporary society, where digital filters create flawless realities and algorithms show us only excellence, the pressure to be perfect has become almost unbearable. We build identities based on flawless performance, transforming every aspect of life into a continuous evaluation. The suffering caused by this pursuit is silent, but profound. Behind social media smiles and impressive professional achievements lies a pain we rarely share, the exhaustion of never feeling enough. The perfectionist lives in a painful paradox. The more they strive for perfection, the more aware they become of their imperfections. With each new standard achieved, an impossible new horizon immediately emerges. This is a peculiar suffering of our time. Ancestors who struggled daily for survival didn't have the privilege of worrying about aesthetic perfection or ideal performance. But today, when many basic needs are met, we create new types of suffering, transforming our mind into a merciless judge that never declares innocence. If you recognize this internal prison, know that you are not alone. The first step toward liberation is precisely this: recognizing the invisible bars we have built around ourselves. It is possible to silence this critical voice. It is possible to find peace in imperfection. It is possible to live without the crushing weight of impossible expectations. And for this, the ancient wisdom of Buddhism has much to teach us. In the Buddhist tradition, there exists a fundamental concept called dukkha, often translated as suffering, but encompassing much more. Dukkha encompasses persistent dissatisfaction, the feeling that something is always missing, even when everything seems perfect. Perfectionism is a powerful modern manifestation of dukkha, a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, a thirst that is never quenched. Buddha taught that the root of this suffering is what we call avidya, the fundamental ignorance about the true nature of reality. The perfectionist lives in deep avidya, believing in two illusions. First, that perfection is possible. Second, that achieving it will bring lasting happiness. These beliefs form the foundation of ongoing suffering. Notice how perfectionism reinforces the illusion of the permanent self, what Buddhists call the error of the fixed self. We create an identity based on our performance and fiercely cling to an idealized self-image. I am someone who doesn't make mistakes. I'm a person of constant excellence, statements that seem noble but are imprisoning. The more we cling to this perfectionist identity, the more we suffer when reality inevitably contradicts this image. Buddhism teaches anatta, the concept of no self or absence of a permanent self. This insight is liberating for the perfectionist. If there is no fixed and permanent self, then there is nothing to be constantly perfected or defended. We are processes in constant change, not fixed entities that need to be polished to perfection. In the Buddhist view, perfectionism is also deeply connected to tanha, insatiable desire. We desire praise, recognition, external validation. We deeply fear rejection, failure, or being considered ordinary. The perfectionist oscillates between the intense desire for perfection and the paralyzing fear of imperfection, a cycle that Buddhists would recognize as part of samsara, the cycle of suffering. But the Buddhist tradition not only identifies suffering, it also offers a path to overcome it. The antidote to perfectionism lies in the practices of karuna, compassion, and maitri, loving kindness. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It is the wisdom to recognize our suffering and respond to it with gentleness instead of self-criticism. When we develop karuna directed toward ourselves, we begin to see how perfectionism is actually a form of psychological self-harm. We realize that mistakes are not moral failures, but opportunities for growth. The Dalai Lama often says that our mistakes are our greatest teachers. They reveal precisely where we need to develop wisdom. The Buddhist path also offers us upekkha, equanimity. This is the ability to observe our failures and successes with the same mental tranquility without being consumed by either. The perfectionist lives on emotional roller coasters, oscillating between euphoria when reaching impossible standards and despair when failing. Equanimity allows us to engage fully in life without being enslaved by results. Buddha never taught mediocrity, he taught the middle way. This means diligent effort without obsessive tension, pursuit of growth without self-flagellation. It means understanding that perfection is not a destination, but that the journey of improvement can be undertaken with lightness and joy, not with severity and punishment. In the ancient province of Katsushika lived an artisan named Takumi, famous for his delicate wooden sculptures. From a young age, he had dedicated his life to perfecting his art, spending days and nights polishing, cutting and refining each piece until there wasn't a single visible imperfection. His reputation grew beyond the limits of his village, and nobles from distant lands commissioned his works. But while the world admired his creations, Takumi lived in constant torment. No work ever seemed perfect enough. He saw flaws invisible to others' eyes and frequently destroyed nearly completed pieces because of minimal imperfections that only he could perceive. As the years passed, his obsessive pursuit of perfection began to take its toll. His hands trembled with exhaustion, his body withered, and his spirit, once vibrant with love for art, was now consumed by anxiety. On an autumn afternoon, when red leaves fell like tears from the trees, Takumi was working on his most ambitious piece, a statue of Kannon, the goddess of compassion. After months of meticulous work, when the statue was almost complete, his chisel slipped, creating a small crack in the serene face of the goddess. Overcome with despair, Takumi raised his hammer to destroy the statue. At that moment, a wandering monk named Eisai, who was passing through the village, heard the artisan's cry of anguish and entered the workshop. Seeing the man about to destroy his work, the monk calmly asked, "Why destroy something in which you have put so much of yourself?" Takumi, with tears in his eyes, pointed to the small crack. "This imperfection has ruined months of work. I cannot offer something imperfect as a representation of perfect compassion." The monk observed the statue in silence for a long time, his eyes absorbing every detail with genuine appreciation. Finally, he spoke. "Would you allow me to spend the night here and show you something in the morning?" Reluctant but intrigued, Takumi agreed. The next morning, when he entered his workshop, he found Monk Eisai sitting in meditation beside the statue. As he approached, Takumi was astonished. The small crack in Kannon's face had been transformed. The monk had applied liquid gold to the crack, creating a delicate golden line that looked like a tear running down the goddess's face. "What have you done?" asked Takumi, divided between indignation and admiration. "I practice kintsugi on your statue," replied Eisai. "Do you know this art?" "The technique of repairing broken ceramics with gold." "Yes, but this is wood, not ceramic." "The principle is the same," explained the monk. "In kintsugi, we don't hide fractures and imperfections. We honor them. The scars become part of the object's story, enhancing its beauty and uniqueness." Eisai took Takumi outside, where the morning sun illuminated the garden. "Observe that cherry tree," he pointed. "Do you consider it beautiful?" Takumi nodded. The tree was majestic, its twisted branches extending gracefully. "And yet," continued the monk, "its trunk is crooked, its branches asymmetrical, its bark cracked with age. Where is the imperfection? Where is the perfection? Or does this distinction exist only in our minds?" In the following days, Eisai remained with Takumi, sharing the teachings of wabi-sabi, the beauty of the imperfect, the impermanent, the incomplete. He taught him about the empty nature of all things, including the concepts of perfection and imperfection. When you seek perfection, Takumi, what are you really seeking? Isn't it recognition? Isn't it the assurance that your self has value? But this self that needs to be perfect is just a temporal illusion, just like the idea that something can be truly perfect or completely imperfect. One night, Eisai asked Takumi to create a small sculpture without planning, letting his hands work freely, without judgment. Don't create despite your imperfections, but through them. For the first time in years, Takumi worked without the crushing weight of self-criticism. When he finished, he presented Eisai with a small figure of a bird in flight. It was simpler than his usual works, with visible tool marks and some asymmetries, but it possessed a vitality that his technically perfect works had never achieved. "This," said Aisai, smiling, "is truly your first masterpiece, because in it, finally, there is no separation between the artist and the art. There is no self trying to prove something, just the natural flow of creation." Before departing, Aisai left a final teaching. "Remember, Takumi, true perfection embraces imperfection. Emptiness contains everything. When you let go of the illusion of the self that needs to be perfect, you find the freedom to simply be." In the years that followed, Takumi transformed his art and his life. His new works, although technically less perfect by his old standards, radiated a beauty and depth that touched the hearts of all who contemplated them. And the statue of Cannon with the golden tear became his most celebrated work, a constant reminder that our wounds, when embraced with compassion, can transform into our greatest beauty. Just as Takumi needed to transform his relationship with imperfection, we too can find freedom from perfectionism through practices inspired by Buddhist wisdom. It's not about abandoning excellence, but about seeking a more sustainable and compassionate path of growth. The first step is to develop awareness of the inner critic. When it arises, practice simply observing this voice without identifying with it. Take a few moments to breathe deeply and ask, is this really my voice? Or is it a conditioned pattern? Where does this demand for perfection come from? In this space of awareness, you begin to realize that the inner critic is not you. It's just a mental habit that you can choose not to identify with. The practice of metta meditation, loving kindness, can be transformative for perfectionists. Begin by directing phrases of compassion toward yourself. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. May I find peace in imperfections. It may feel uncomfortable at first. The perfectionist often resists self-compassion, fearing it will lead to mediocrity. But experience shows the opposite. When we free ourselves from the tyranny of perfectionism, our creativity and authenticity naturally flourish. Try the practice of intentional failure, small exercises where you deliberately make mistakes or leave something incomplete. This can be as simple as sending an email with a small typo, or leaving a household task partially completed. Observe carefully the sensations that arise, the anxiety, the discomfort, the urge to immediately correct. By resisting this impulse, you gradually desensitize the fear of error and develop tolerance for imperfection. Contemplation of impermanence, anicca, also offers relief to the perfectionist. Remember that nothing, not even your mistakes, is permanent. The report containing a small error, the presentation that wasn't perfect, the awkward conversation, none of this will exist in 100 years. This perspective is not to diminish your work, but to put it in context, allowing you to engage fully without the weight of paralyzing perfectionism. In the Zen tradition, there exists the concept of shoshin, or beginner's mind, the ability to approach each experience with curiosity and openness, free from rigid expectations. Practice cultivating this quality when starting new projects. Instead of setting impossible standards in advance, allow yourself to be a curious explorer on the journey, discovering what naturally emerges. A particularly powerful practice is what Buddhists call equanimity in the face of praise and criticism. Observe how you desperately cling to praise and contract in the face of criticism. Both reactions strengthen the perfectionist ego. When receiving feedback, positive or negative, practice receiving it with the same balanced center, seeing it as useful information, not as validation or condemnation of your intrinsic worth. In daily life, practice replacing perfectionist internal dialogue with a more compassionate one. When you notice thoughts like "this isn't good enough" or "I should be better," gently recognize this pattern and replace it with "I'm doing the best I can at this moment," or "this is a learning opportunity." This is not a technique of superficial affirmation, but a deep realignment with truth. The truth that you, like all beings, are a work in progress, continuously learning and growing. Finally, remember that the path beyond perfectionism is not linear. There will be days of relapse, moments when the inner critic will speak loudly again. When this happens, don't add a layer of self-criticism for being self-critical. That only strengthens the cycle. Instead, greet these moments with a smile of recognition. Ah, my old friend, perfectionism is back. This gentle and humorous response is, in itself, an act of liberation. True perfection, as Takumi discovered, is not in the absence of flaws, but in the harmonious integration of all our qualities, including our vulnerabilities and imperfections. It is in accepting our complete humanity that we find not only peace, but also the most authentic and powerful expression of who we truly are. When we free ourselves from the prison of perfectionism, we begin to experience life in a completely new way. Colors seem more vivid, connections deeper, work more fluid. It's not that we do less, we often accomplish more, but we do it from a place of freedom, not compulsion. This is the true promise of Buddhist teachings for our age of relentless performance, not an escape from excellence, but a redefinition of it. Excellence not as the absence of flaws, but as the authentic and integrated expression of who we are, imperfections and all. Today, I invite you to take a small step toward freedom. Perhaps it's practicing 5 minutes of self-compassion meditation. Perhaps it's sharing a vulnerability with someone you trust. Perhaps it's simply noticing with gentleness when the inner critic begins to speak and remembering that you are more than that voice. The Buddhist path teaches us that true transformation doesn't happen all at once. It's cultivated through small daily choices, moments of awareness that, added together, change the course of our lives. Each time you choose to respond to a mistake with kindness instead of self-criticism, you strengthen new neural patterns. Each time you celebrate the process instead of obsessing over the perfect result, you rewrite the story you tell yourself. The journey beyond perfectionism is perhaps one of the most important we will undertake in this life. Because when we free ourselves from the inner tyrant that demands constant perfection, we not only alleviate our own suffering, we open space to manifest our deepest gifts in the world. If this teaching resonated with you, I invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to our channel, leave your comment sharing your own journey with perfectionism, and turn on notifications to receive future teachings. Together, we can cultivate a space where imperfection is not merely tolerated, but celebrated as the fertile ground where our shared humanity flourishes. Remember, you don't need to be perfect to be complete. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. In fact, it's by embracing your complete humanity, with all its golden cracks, that you discover the true beauty of who you are.